Chapter 1: The County Clerk's Office. The air conditioning blasted down, making the back of your neck cold. Leo Foster signed his name on the final page of the divorce agreement. His signature was firm, without a trace of hesitation. Across the table, his ex-wife now, Chloe Sullivan, let out a long sigh, her face a mask of undisguised relief. She snatched the papers from him the second he lifted the pen, rushing them over to the clerk as if they were a hot potato she couldn't wait to get rid of. There, finally done. Chloe's voice was quiet, but it was brimming with the giddy joy of someone who'd just been set free. Her mother, Karen Sullivan, sitting beside her, hadn't even bothered to look at Leo. A contemptuous smirk played on her lips. "I told you, Chloe, a man with no ambition will only drag you down. The sooner you cut him loose, the better." She paused, pulling a small compact from her purse. "Look at you, wasting 3 years of your prime." Karen carefully adjusted her perfectly coiffed hair in the mirror, acting as if she were at a high society luncheon, not the county office finalizing her daughter's divorce. Leo's face was a blank slate. No ambition. For 3 years, he'd worked his fingers to the bone for this family. Chloe hated the smell of cooking oil, so he made every single meal. Karen complained about her bad back, so he handled all the housework. Every month, he deposited his entire paycheck into their joint account, keeping only a couple $100s for gas and incidentals. When Chloe's brother needed seed money for his next big idea, Leo had even drained the savings his parents had given him, handing over $20,000 without a second thought. And in the end, all he got for it was no ambition. It was laughable, utterly, ridiculously laughable. Leo's gaze drifted to his father-in-law, George Sullivan, who had been silent the entire time. The man was honest and unassuming, a quiet fixture in a house where he had virtually no say. He was slumped in a chair in the corner, his back looking stooped and lonely. As if sensing Leo's stare, George looked up. He gave Leo a weary, apologetic smile that spoke volumes. Leo gave a slight nod in return. He knew that George was the only one in this family who felt even a shred of guilt about how he'd been treated. The clerk finished stamping the documents, making the separation official. He handed them 2 dark red folders, each containing a copy of the finalized divorce decree. One for Leo, one for Chloe. "All right, folks. As of this moment, you are no longer legally married." Chloe grabbed her folder and shoved it into her designer handbag without a glance. She stood up, linking arms with her mother, her laughter bright and brittle. "Let's go, Mom. How about that new seafood place tonight to celebrate?" "Absolutely. And that investor I told you about, Rick Vance? I texted him. He's free tonight. I invited him to join us." "Oh, Mom, you should have told me. I'm a total mess. I didn't even try to look nice today." "Don't be silly. My daughter is a natural beauty. You look 100 times better than other women, even on your worst day." The two chattered on as if he wasn't there, their voices full of breathless anticipation for the wonderful life that awaited them. It was clear they already considered Leo a piece of trash they'd just taken out, not even worthy of a backward glance. Leo clutched the folder in his hand, the irony of it all burning in his chest. He stood up, ready to leave this suffocating place behind. 3 years of marriage. It felt like a ridiculous, exhausting dream. And now, he was finally awake. He felt no lingering attachment, only release. But just as he took his first step toward the door, a quiet but firm voice stopped him. "Wait." Leo turned. It was his father-in-law, George. He had gotten up from his corner chair and was now standing in front of the clerk's desk. Chloe and Karen paused, looking back at him, annoyed. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Let's go," Chloe urged impatiently. Karen's brow furrowed. "George, what are you dawdling for now? Haven't we had enough embarrassment for one day?" George ignored them both. His eyes were fixed on the clerk. With a trembling hand, he pulled his own driver's license and passport from his coat pocket and laid them on the counter. He looked at the clerk with a resolve Leo had never seen in him before. It was the look of a man who had suppressed a lifetime of frustration, a dam that was finally, irrevocably breaking. The clerk looked confused. "Can I help you with something, sir?" George took a deep breath, forcing the words out from between his teeth. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the suddenly frozen faces of his wife and daughter. Then he said, word by deliberate word, "I want a divorce, too." Chapter 2: The air in the room turned to ice. The look of smug satisfaction on Karen's face cracked like a cheap porcelain mask. She stared, wide-eyed, refusing to believe what she'd just heard. "George, what did you just say?" Chloe was stunned. The arm linked through her mother's went limp. Her jaw dropped. "Dad? Are you insane?" In the entire office, it seemed only Leo and the clerk remained composed. Leo was in pure shock. He had imagined many post-divorce scenarios, but this was not one of them. His father-in-law was filing for divorce. The clerk, on the other hand, was a model of professional detachment. She glanced from George to Karen, asking in a neutral tone, "Is this your wife, sir? Are you both filing for a voluntary, uncontested divorce?" Karen reacted like a cornered animal. "Who wants a divorce? What is wrong with you?" she shrieked. She stomped over to George, jabbing a finger in his face. "George Sullivan, you better explain yourself right now. What is the meaning of this?" For as long as Leo had known him, George had never stood up to his wife. But today he did. He didn't look at Karen. He spoke calmly and clearly to the clerk. "Yes, we are. It's voluntary. The marriage has been broken for a long time. There's no chance of reconciliation." "That's bullshit." Karen's voice was so shrill it turned heads across the office. Onlookers started to whisper and stare. "You spineless coward, George. You have a nerve to ask me for a divorce? Everything you have, the food you eat, the clothes on your back, it's all because of my family. If it wasn't for my father getting you that cushy city job, you'd still be on an assembly line somewhere. What right do you have to divorce me?" Leo had heard this exact speech for 3 years. Every time Karen wanted to belittle her husband, she used the same lines. In the past, George would just hang his head and take it. Not today. He actually let out a small, soft laugh. It was a sound filled with a universe of sorrow and release. "You're right. Everything you said is right." He began to speak, his voice low but perfectly clear. "So, I'll walk away with nothing. The house, the cars, the savings. It's all yours and Chloe's. All I want are my personal documents. And my freedom." He whispered the word freedom, but it landed like a bombshell, exploding in the ears of Karen and Chloe. Karen was completely dumbfounded. She had expected him to argue, to yell, maybe even get physical. She had never, in her wildest dreams, imagined he would choose this, the most absolute, most final way to end their 30-year marriage. Walk away with nothing? Had he lost his mind? He was nearly 60, with no money and no house. How would he survive? Chloe finally snapped out of her stupor and ran to grab her father's arm. "Dad, stop it. This isn't funny. I'm the one getting divorced today. Why are you making a scene? Just apologize to Mom and let's go home." In her mind, this had to be her father throwing a tantrum. All she had to do was coax him, say a few nice words like always, and it would all blow over. But she couldn't move him. His arm felt like it was cast in iron. He looked at his daughter, his eyes full of disappointment. "Chloe, I'm not making a scene. You and your mother. I hope you have a good life." With that, he turned away from his stunned wife and daughter and addressed the clerk again. "Ma'am, if you could please help us with the paperwork." The clerk glanced at the near-hysterical Karen, then at the resolute George, and made a token attempt at mediation. "Sir, ma'am, a divorce is a serious decision. Perhaps you should go home and think it over." "No need to think," George said, his voice like steel. The shock finally wore off, and a tidal wave of panic and fury washed over Karen. She couldn't get divorced. Absolutely not. If she, Karen Sullivan, got divorced by this pathetic loser, how could she ever show her face at the country club or at her bridge games again? What would people say? That she couldn't even control her own husband? George Sullivan, I'm telling you right now, I do not agree. I will never, ever agree to this divorce. Karen collapsed to the floor, slapping her thighs and wailing at the top of her lungs. My life is over. I worked my whole life to raise an ungrateful family. Now the old one and the young one are ganging up on me. A small crowd was gathering, pointing and murmuring. Chloe's face flushed beet red with shame and anger. Mom, get up. You're embarrassing me. Leo stood to the side, a cold observer to the unfolding drama. Suddenly, his own 3 years of mistreatment felt insignificant. Compared to the 30 years of silent suffering his father-in-law had endured, he was lucky. He looked at George. The quiet, reserved man showed no reaction to his wife's theatrics. His expression was empty, serene, as if he were watching a stranger. In that moment, Leo understood. There is no greater sorrow than a dead heart. George's heart had died a long time ago. Today, he was just holding the funeral for his marriage, 30 years too late. In the middle of the chaos, as if sensing his gaze, George turned and looked at Leo. Their eyes met. No words were needed. George gave him that same sad smile again, and then a small, deliberate nod. It was a gesture of mutual understanding between two men. Leo nodded back. Then, he turned and walked out of the county clerk's office without looking back. The sounds of shouting and crying were muffled by the heavy glass doors. Outside, the sun was bright. Leo took a deep breath. It smelled like freedom. He'd only gone a few steps when he heard footsteps hurrying behind him. Now, it was George's voice. Leo stopped and turned. George had emerged, holding a dark red folder of his own. The deep-set wrinkles on his face seemed to have softened. He looked lighter, relieved. George, Leo corrected himself. George waved a hand dismissively, a self-deprecating smile on his face. Don't be so formal. He looked at Leo, his eyes sincere. From now on, if you don't mind, you can call me George. Or an old friend. Leo was taken aback. George clapped him on the shoulder and sighed. These past 3 years. I'm sorry for what you went through. Come on, let's you and me. Let's go get a drink. He held up his folder, then gestured with his chin toward the one in Leo's hand. Today we're divorce buddies. This calls for a celebration. Chapter 3, a local tap house on a street corner. It was early evening, and the place was buzzing with a happy hour crowd, filled with the comforting smell of burgers and stale beer. Leo and George sat across from each other at a small table, a couple of appetizers, and 2 frosted pints of lager between them. It was the first time Leo had ever had a drink alone with his father-in-law, his former father-in-law. At home, Karen ran a tight ship. George was barely allowed to speak loudly, let alone drink. George was clearly reveling in the freedom. He filled his own glass to the brim, then topped off Leo's. To us, Leo. Cheers. The 2 glasses clinked together with a satisfying thud. The cold, slightly bitter liquid was incredibly refreshing. Ah, George sighed, downing half his glass in one go, a healthy flush rising to his cheeks. Now that's what I'm talking about. He looked at Leo, his expression apologetic. Sorry you had to see all that back at the house over the years. Leo shook his head, taking a sip of his own beer. George, don't say that. I should be the one apologizing. I couldn't give Chloe the life she wanted. It was part politeness, part truth. He genuinely hadn't been able to satisfy Chloe and Karen's ever-growing appetite for more. George just laughed, a tired, knowing sound. You still don't get it, do you? It has nothing to do with what you could or couldn't provide. Even if you were a billionaire, they'd still find something to complain about. In their eyes, your biggest flaw was that you were too good, too capable, too willing to put up with their crap. Leo was stunned. He never expected to hear something like this from George. You did everything, so what was left for them to do? When people have too much time on their hands, they start looking for problems. They start wondering how they can make you even more obedient. George poured himself more beer, his voice laced with self-mockery. I'm living proof. I put up with it for 30 years, thinking if I just stayed quiet, things would be peaceful. And what did I get for it? They decided I was a pathetic loser. Bullying me became a habit, something they were entitled to. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. You're smarter than me, Leo. It only took you 3 years to figure it out. It took me 30. Leo was silent. He could feel the immense weight behind George's words, the accumulated regret and bitterness of a man who had spent half his life being crushed. So, what's your plan now? Leo asked. It was the question that had been nagging at him. George had walked away with nothing. A man nearing 60, with no money to his name. Where could he possibly go? What plan can I have? George smiled sadly. Find some odd jobs, rent a small room somewhere. Live out the rest of my days in peace. I've got a small pension. I won't starve. Leo frowned. That wasn't right. He thought for a moment. George, if you don't mind, you can stay with me for now. I'm renting a 2-bedroom apartment. The other room is empty. George froze, then quickly waved his hands. No, I couldn't do that. You just got divorced. You need your own space. I'd just be in the way. You wouldn't be in the way, Leo said firmly. I live there alone anyway. The room's just sitting empty. Besides, I paid the lease a year in advance, so it's a waste if no one uses it. And hey, he added, trying to lighten the mood with George's own words, we're divorce buddies now, right? We can split the bills. It'll be great. George looked into Leo's sincere eyes and hesitated. The truth was, he had nowhere else to go. Go back to his hometown? He'd burned those bridges years ago when he'd sided with Karen over his own family. Now, showing up like this, he'd just be a laughingstock. Stay with friends? After a lifetime under Karen's thumb, he didn't have any real friends left. I don't know. There's nothing to know. Leo cut him off gently. It's settled. After we finish here, I'll take you over. Seeing the unwavering look on Leo's face, George felt a warmth spread through his chest. He finally, slowly nodded. Okay, then. Thank you, Leo. I appreciate it. Meanwhile, back at the Sullivan residence, the scene was one of utter chaos. Karen had smashed everything she could get her hands on in the living room. Shards of an expensive vase and a crystal figurine littered the floor. She was now slumped on the couch, chest heaving, tear tracks staining her cheeks. Chloe was pacing anxiously, phone pressed to her ear. Hello, Uncle Mike? Is Dad with you? He's not. Aunt Carol? Have you seen my dad? No. She made one call after another, running through their entire list of family and friends. No one had seen or heard from George. It was as if he'd vanished off the face of the earth. Well, did you find him? Karen asked, her voice hoarse. Chloe threw her phone onto the sofa in frustration. No, nobody's seen him, and his phone is off. That old bastard. Karen cursed. Where could he go? He doesn't have a dime to his name. I give him 3 days before he comes crawling back, begging for forgiveness. She said the words, but a knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. George's behavior today had been completely out of character. That look of finality in his eyes. She had never seen it before in all her years of marriage. Chloe felt a suffocating weight in her chest. Today was supposed to be a day of celebration, the first day of her new, liberated life. But thanks to her father's stunt, the mood was ruined. The celebratory seafood dinner was canceled, and she had to reschedule with Rick Vance. The house was a disaster. Leo had always been the one to clean up. Now, looking at the mess, she didn't even know where to start. Mom, stop yelling. Chloe snapped. What are we going to do? Dad really left. How should I know what to do? Karen shot back, still fuming. Let him go, as if we can't survive without him. Just then, the doorbell rang. Chloe's eyes lit up. Is that Dad? She rushed to the door and threw it open. But it wasn't George. It was a plumber in a jumpsuit. Hi, are you the one who called about a burst pipe in the kitchen? Chloe stared blankly. She'd completely forgotten. The pipe under the kitchen sink had been leaking all afternoon. Normally, something like this would just require a single phone call to Leo, who would be there within the hour to fix it. She had instinctively reached for her phone to call him, before remembering they were divorced. She'd had to find a 24-hour plumber online. All right. Yes, please, come in. The plumber took one look under the sink and whistled. Wow, this valve is completely rusted through. The whole fixture needs to be replaced. This is a pretty big job. So, how much will it be? Chloe asked nervously. The plumber held up 5 fingers. 500. Chloe thought that sounded steep. The plumber chuckled. Ma'am, 500 wouldn't even cover the parts. I'm talking 5,000. What? 5,000. Chloe and Karen shrieked in unison. Are you trying to rob us? Karen stormed into the kitchen. $5,000 to replace a pipe? Do we look like idiots to you? The plumber's friendly demeanor vanished. He packed up his tools. If you think it's too expensive, feel free to call someone else. But let me tell you, in an old house like this, the plumbing is shot. You don't fix this today, your whole kitchen will be flooded by morning. And that's going to cost you a lot more than $5,000. He turned to leave. Wait, don't go. Chloe pleaded. She looked at the growing puddle on the floor and felt a wave of despair. For the first time, she found herself desperately missing Leo. He might have been boring, he might have had no ambition, but he had always been there to silently, competently handle everything. Changing a light bulb, fixing a running toilet, unclogging a drain. All the little things she'd never even noticed now loomed before her like insurmountable mountains. Chloe bit her lip. She pulled out her phone and, as if guided by some unseen force, scrolled to a number that should have been deleted. Now, She hesitated for a second, then pressed the call button. The phone rang for a long time. Just as she was about to give up, he answered. Hello. It was Leo's voice. It sounded like he was somewhere loud. A flicker of hope ignited in Chloe's chest. She immediately put on her most pitiful, damsel-in-distress voice. Now, where are you? The pipe under the kitchen sink burst. Can you please come back and fix it? On the other end of the line, Leo was clinking glasses with George. Hearing the manufactured panic in Chloe's voice, he felt nothing, not a shred of pity. If anything, he found it amusing. Divorced for all of a few hours, and she was already calling him for help? Did she really still see him as her on-call, unpaid handyman? We're divorced, Chloe. Leo's voice was perfectly calm, betraying no emotion. Problems at your house are something you should call a plumber for, not your ex-husband. His words left Chloe speechless. She had braced herself for a range of possible reactions. Sarcasm, maybe, or a half-hearted excuse. But she had been certain that, in the end, he would cave. After all, he had been devoted to her for years. She never imagined he would refuse so bluntly, so coldly. It was as if their 3 years of marriage, their 7 years together, had been completely erased the moment the decree was signed. Now, how can you be so cruel? Chloe's voice rose, sharp with disbelief and accusation. Even though we're divorced, we were still husband and wife. The house is flooding, and you won't even come help? Are you that heartless? Heartless? Leo almost laughed out loud. Who was the heartless one here? Who couldn't wait to run off and celebrate with another man the second the ink was dry? Whose mother had stood there calling him a loser and telling him to get lost? Now that she needed something, suddenly she remembered they were husband and wife. Chloe, I am not your backup plan, and I am not your repairman. Leo's tone grew icy. Everything I did for you, I did because I considered you my wife. Now, we are nothing to each other. I have no obligation to do anything for you ever again. With that, he hung up, unwilling to listen to another second of her manipulative nonsense. Beep, beep, beep. The dial tone buzzed in her ear. Chloe stood frozen, phone in hand. He hung up on her? He actually dared to hang up on her? A hot flush of humiliation and rage surged through her. That bastard. She hurled her phone against the sofa cushions. Karen, who had overheard the conversation, was livid. He's got some nerve. A piece of trash we threw out of our house. And now he's acting high and mighty. Forget him, sweetie. It's not like we can't survive without him. Gritting her teeth, Karen turned to the plumber. 5,000, you said? Fine. Fix it. And do it right, or I'll report you to the Better Business Bureau. The plumber shrugged and unpacked his tools again. An hour and $5,000 later, the pipe was fixed. Karen swiped her card, wincing as the charge went through. That was $5,000 she could have used for a new handbag. The house was quiet again, but the mood was heavier than ever. Staring at the mess in the living room, smelling the faint, sour scent of old takeout in the air, and looking at the shiny new valve under the sink, it dawned on both of them with painful clarity. Leo's departure had left a void far bigger than just his physical absence. He had provided a sense of stability and convenience they had taken for granted and never once appreciated. Mom, where could Dad have gone? Chloe asked, collapsing onto the sofa, drained of all energy. How should I know? Karen snapped. I hope he's lying dead in a ditch somewhere. It would be less embarrassing. Despite her harsh words, she picked up her phone and dialed George's number again. Still off. A fear unlike anything she had ever known began to wrap its tendrils around her heart. Back at the tap house, George had watched the entire phone call play out. After Leo hung up, George spoke slowly. Was that Chloe? Leo nodded. Yeah, a pipe burst at the house. George sighed and shook his head. He didn't say anything else, just quietly drained his glass. Some lessons, he knew, people had to learn the hard way. They finished their beers, the two of them sharing a comfortable silence. When they left, Leo took George back to his apartment. It was a simple, clean two-bedroom. George, this is the guest room. The bedding is all new. It's not much, but it'll do for tonight, Leo said, pushing open the door to the spare bedroom. George looked at the neatly made bed and the clean, bright room and felt a wave of emotion. The apartment was small, but it felt more like a home than the cold, sterile house he'd just left. It's perfect, Leo. More than perfect, George said, nodding gratefully. He set down the small, worn duffel bag that contained a few changes of clothes he'd packed, as if shedding a heavy burden he'd carried for years. Leo, today. Thank you. Don't mention it, Leo smiled. Get some rest. I have to step out for a bit. It's so late. Where are you going? Just have to take care of something. Leo didn't elaborate. He grabbed his keys and left. The night was dark. Instead of heading home, Leo took a cab to the city's most affluent commercial district, the kind of place with streets lined with luxury boutiques. He walked into a brightly lit Porsche dealership. A young salesman in a sharp suit greeted him immediately. Good evening, sir. Are you interested in one of our vehicles? The salesman's smile was professional, but his eyes held a hint of dismissive appraisal. Leo was wearing the same plain t-shirt and jeans he'd had on all day, an outfit that probably cost less than $100. He didn't exactly scream, Porsche customer. Leo paid him no mind. He walked directly to the center of the showroom, where a black Porsche Cayenne stood gleaming under the spotlights. Sleek lines and aggressive stance. It had once been his dream car. It had also been Chloe's. She had mentioned it countless times, telling him that as soon as he made it, a Cayenne was the first thing he had to buy her. Back then, Leo thought it was an impossible dream. But now, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the hood. I'll take this one. His voice was quiet, but in the hushed showroom, it was as clear as a bell. The salesman blinked. Sure he had misheard. Excuse me, sir. What did you say? Leo turned to face him and repeated, his voice even and calm. I said, I'll take this car. I'm paying in full, and I'd like to drive it off the lot tonight. He pulled a black, metallic card from his wallet and held it out. You can run this. The salesman's eyes widened as he saw the card. It wasn't a standard credit card. It was a Centurion card, the legendary Amex Black Card, reserved for the ultra-wealthy, with no preset spending limit. In an instant, the condescending professionalism vanished, replaced by an almost comical level of reverence and awe. He bowed his head, his back bent at a near 90-degree angle. Yes, sir. Of course, sir. Right away. Please, just one moment while I get the paperwork started. He took the card with both hands, as if it were a holy relic, and practically sprinted toward the manager's office. The dealership, once quiet, was now buzzing. Every employee was staring at Leo with a mixture of shock and envy. Paying for a Cayenne in full? Who was this guy? Just then, the glass doors of the dealership swung open, and a stylishly dressed couple walked in. The woman was clinging to the man's arm, a syrupy, sweet smile on her face. Honey, are you really going to buy me that red 718? Of course, baby. Anything for you. The woman squealed with delight and planted a kiss on the man's cheek. As she turned her head, her eyes fell on Leo, standing next to the Cayenne. Her smile froze on her face. Leo saw her at the same moment. It was Chloe, and the slick, smarmy-looking man next to her was, without a doubt, the Rick Vance her mother had been so excited about. Chapter 5. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The color drained from Chloe's face. She couldn't believe it. Of all the places, of all the ways to run into him again, this was impossible. He was supposed to be in his shabby little apartment, nursing his wounded pride after she called him. What was he doing here? At the most exclusive car dealership in the city? Standing next to a $100,000 SUV? Rick Vance hadn't noticed Chloe's reaction. His attention was drawn to the commotion around Leo, the fawning salespeople, the manager scurrying about. Well, what's going on over there? Who's the big shot? Rick asked, intrigued. A salesperson hurried over, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Mr. Vance, you won't believe it. That gentleman just bought the top-of-the-line Cayenne. Paid in full. What? Rick's voice jumped an octave. Paid in full for a Cayenne? That was over $100,000. Easy. The BMW 5 Series he drove was on a 4-year loan. He looked Leo up and down, his eyes filled with suspicion and disbelief. The guy was dressed like he shopped at Walmart. There was no way he could just drop that kind of cash. For Chloe, the words hit like a bolt of lightning. Now, bought a Cayenne, paid in full? How was that possible? Where did he get that kind of money? He was the man who handed over his entire paycheck, whose wallet was perpetually empty. Had he won the lottery? Or had he been lying to her all these years? Was he secretly wealthy? 1,000 thoughts crashed through Chloe's mind. leaving her dizzy and confused. She stared at the man she thought she knew, but he was a complete stranger to her now. He stood there, calm and composed, as if he'd just bought a bag of groceries, not a luxury car. That air of casual indifference, contrasted with his cheap clothes, created an aura of intimidating power. At that moment, the dealership manager came rushing back, holding a credit card machine and a stack of papers. "Mr. Foster, so sorry for the wait. Everything is ready. If you could just sign here, the car is all yours." The smile on the manager's face was so deferential, it bordered on pathetic. Leo took the pen and signed his name with a flourish. Throughout the entire process, he didn't spare Chloe or Rick so much as a sideways glance. That complete and utter dismissal was more humiliating than any taunt or boast could ever be. Chloe felt her cheeks burn as if she'd been slapped in public. It was even worse when she saw the look on Rick's face as he stared at Leo, a mixture of doubt, awe, and even a hint of deference. Rick was, above all, an opportunist. Anyone who could buy a Kian outright was someone worth knowing. He cleared his throat and confidently strode toward Leo, a practiced, friendly smile plastered on his face. "Hey, my friend, that's one hell of a car. Great choice. The name's Rick Vance. I'm in real estate development. Always good to meet another player in the city." He extended his hand for a handshake. Leo finished signing, handed the pen back to the manager, and only then did he give Rick a brief, dismissive glance. He made no move to shake his hand. "I don't know you." 4 simple words. The smile on Rick's face froze solid. The air grew thick with awkwardness. Chloe's face cycled through shades of white and red. What was Leo doing? Was he trying to humiliate her on purpose? Rick was a man who cared about his image. Being publicly shut down by a complete stranger was a major blow to his ego. He awkwardly retracted his hand, his smile turning into a grimace. "Not playing it cool, huh? I get it." He turned back to Chloe, hoping to regain some control of the situation, his tone becoming a little too loud, a little too showy. "Chloe, babe, is this a friend of yours? You should have introduced us." Chloe's lips trembled, but she couldn't form a single word. "Introduce them? How?" "Rick, this is my ex-husband, Leo. You know, the deadbeat loser my mom. And I kicked to the curb this morning. Yeah, he just bought a Porsche. With cash." If she said that, she might as well just crawl into a hole and die. She could only shake her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, I don't know him." "You don't?" Rick raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. He could tell from her reaction that there was a story there. An idea sparked in his mind. He turned back to Chloe, putting his arm around her and speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Well, forget him, honey. Let's go look at our car. You wanted that red 718, right? Come on, I'm buying it for you tonight." He intentionally emphasized the word buying, trying to one-up Leo and salvage his pride. He pulled Chloe along, and she stumbled after him toward the red sports car. Her mind was a complete blank. She was moving on autopilot, but her eyes kept darting back to Leo. She was desperate for him to look at her, to show some sign of anger, of jealousy, of anything. But there was nothing. Leo never looked at her again. He took the key fob from the manager and pressed the unlock button. Chirp, chirp. The Kian's headlights flashed to life, like a predator awakening from a deep sleep. Leo opened the driver's side door and slid inside. With a deep, satisfying rumble, the engine roared to life, and the black SUV began to slowly roll out of the showroom. It passed right by Chloe and Rick. The driver's side window was down, and Leo's profile was as cold and sharp as a sculpture. He stared straight ahead, not pausing for even a fraction of a second. He was like a king departing his court, utterly indifferent to the subjects he left behind. Chloe was left standing there, a chill seeping deep in her bones. Rick, too, was stunned into silence by the sheer force of Leo's presence. He didn't speak again until the Kian's taillights had disappeared into the night. "Damn," he finally muttered under his breath. He turned to look at Chloe, but the desire in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by a look of calculation and disdain. He wasn't stupid. There was definitely something going on between Chloe and the guy in the Kian. And from the looks of it, Chloe was the one who had been dumped. A woman who got dumped by a guy who could drop 6 figures on a car like it was nothing. Rick's interest evaporated. He had assumed Chloe was from a wealthy, well-connected family. He didn't need this kind of drama. Hey, Chloe. Rick's tone was suddenly polite and distant. I just remembered I have an early meeting tomorrow. Super important. About the car. Why don't we talk about it another time? Chloe snapped back to reality, a cold dread washing over her as she saw the phony smile on his face. She knew what was happening. He was bailing. Rick, but you said. Yeah, well, business is business. He cut her off impatiently. He got to go. You can grab a taxi or something, right? Without another word, he turned and walked briskly out of the dealership, leaving her standing there alone. The salespeople, who had been falling all over her just minutes before, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and scorn. The red Porsche 718 gleamed under the lights, alluring and beautiful. But to Chloe, it now looked like a cruel joke at her expense. An overwhelming wave of shame and loss crashed over her. She covered her face with her hands, sank to the floor, and began to sob. Why? Why did everything have to turn out like this? Chapter 6. The black Cayenne moved smoothly through the late-night city streets. Soft jazz played from the premium sound system. Leo's hands rested on the steering wheel, but he didn't feel the thrill he had expected. There was no triumphant satisfaction, no smug pleasure in revenge. There was only a quiet, settling sense of finality. The money hadn't come from a lottery ticket. 3 years ago, just before his wedding, he had taken the savings he'd accumulated from years of work, along with a significant gift from his parents, and invested it all in his college roommate's tech startup. At the time, everyone thought he was crazy. Karen had called him a reckless fool for throwing his money away. Chloe had pleaded with him to use the money for a down payment on her brother's condo, calling it a much safer investment. But for once, he had trusted his gut. Over the last 3 years, he'd practically forgotten about it, pouring all his energy into his marriage and his job, playing the part of the good husband and good son-in-law. Then, last week, his old roommate had called. The company had gone public. As an angel investor, the value of Leo's initial shares had multiplied 100-fold. Overnight, he had become a multi-millionaire. He hadn't told a soul. He had planned to surprise Chloe on their wedding anniversary. He had even put a deposit down on this very Cayenne. He had imagined her ecstatic reaction, imagined Karen finally treating him with a shred of respect. He thought money could buy him the approval he so desperately craved. Reality, however, had delivered a swift, brutal slap to the face. Before their anniversary even arrived, they were signing divorce papers. It was for the best, he thought with a wry smile. It had shown him who people really were. His phone buzzed. It was a text alert from his bank. A withdrawal of $188,000. 00 has been processed from your account, ending in XXXX. Current balance, $9,8XX. XX. Leo glanced at the message and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The money was just a number to him now. When he got back to his apartment, George was still up, watching TV in the living room. He stood up when Leo walked in. You're back. His eyes drifted to the window, and he saw the brand-new black SUV parked on the street below. He froze. Is that car? Just bought it, Leo said, kicking off his shoes and placing the keys on the entryway table. But where did you get that kind of money? George asked, his face a mask of disbelief. He recognized the brand. A Porsche like that had to cost a fortune. How could Leo possibly afford it? Leo smiled. He saw no reason to hide it from George and briefly explained the investment he had made years ago. George listened, his mouth hanging open, utterly speechless. He looked at Leo with a complex mix of shock, happiness, and above all, profound regret. He felt sorry for his daughter. She had held a priceless diamond in her hands and, convinced it was a worthless rock, had thrown it away without a second thought. Does Chloe know about this? George asked tentatively. She didn't before tonight, Leo said flatly, but I have a feeling she does now. He told George about running into her and Rick Vance at the dealership. George let out a long, heavy sigh and sank onto the sofa. What a mess. He shook his head, not specifying who he was talking about. Anyway, let's not talk about them, Leo said, wanting to change the subject. He grabbed 2 bottles of water from the fridge and tossed one to George. George, I was thinking today, we can't just sit around doing nothing. I want to open a business, a small restaurant. What do you think? George took the water, his interest piqued. A restaurant? That's a great idea. What kind? Getting busy, he knew, was the best medicine for a troubled mind. I haven't decided on all the details yet, Leo admitted. But if I remember correctly, you used to be the head chef at that big hotel downtown, right? George's eyes lit up for a second, then dimmed just as quickly. That was a lifetime ago. After I got married, I never cooked professionally again. Karen had hated it. She said being a chef was a dirty, low-class job. So, through his father-in-law's connections, he had taken a quiet, mind-numbing logistics job with the city and stayed there for 30 years. His culinary skills had been left to wither and die. Leo looked at him intently. Skills like that don't just disappear, George. They're just dormant. I bet if you picked it up again, you'd be better than any of these celebrity chefs on TV. I want to open an exclusive, reservations-only place. Nothing big. An elegant, intimate dining room. We'll only serve a few tables a night, focusing on incredible, authentic food. You'll be the head chef. I'll handle the business side of things. We'll be partners, and we'll split the profits 50-50. George's heart skipped a beat. Opening his own restaurant had been his biggest dream as a young man. It was a dream that had been slowly and painfully eroded by the daily grind of his marriage, until it had faded completely. And now, here was Leo, dusting it off and presenting it back to him. Could I still do it? George asked, his voice filled with doubt. It's been 30 years since I've run a professional kitchen. Of course you can. Leo's tone was absolute. I believe in you. 4 simple words. George's eyes immediately welled up. For 30 years, all he had heard from Karen and Chloe was, "You can't do that," or "You're just a loser." And now Leo, his former son-in-law, was telling him, "I believe in you." All right. George slapped his knee and shot to his feet. Let's do it. Leo, if you're willing to trust me, then I, George Sullivan, swear I won't let you down, even if it kills me. He stood up straighter than he had in decades. It was as if the passionate, brilliant young chef from 30 years ago had finally come back. The next day, they got straight to work. Leo drove his new Cayenne with George in the passenger seat, and they began scouting locations all over the city. Sitting in the spacious, leather-appointed seat, watching the city fly by, George felt like he was in a dream. Just a day ago, he had been a pathetic old man, despised by his family, homeless, and with no future. Now, he not only had a place to live, but he was riding in a luxury car on his way to finally realize his lifelong dream. The change was staggering. Leo isn't driving a car this fancy to look for properties a little flashy, George asked, feeling self-conscious. Leo just smiled. George, you're not thinking like a businessman. When you're starting a high-end restaurant, image is everything. When we pull up in this, landlords will see that we're serious and have money to back it up. They'll be more willing to show us the best locations, and we'll have more leverage when we negotiate. It's called branding. George listened, impressed. He nodded. You really know your stuff. After a morning of searching, they found the perfect spot, a 2-story building with a private courtyard, tucked away in a quiet, historic neighborhood. It used to be a tea house, and its elegant, traditional architecture was exactly what Leo had envisioned for their restaurant. The landlord, a pot-bellied man in a polo shirt, saw Leo step out of the Cayenne, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. The negotiation was short and sweet. Leo was decisive, making a strong offer on the spot for a 5-year lease and offering to pay the entire amount up front. The landlord was ecstatic, saying he'd never had a tenant so easy to work with. Standing outside the building, now, George looked at the front door, his hands trembling with excitement. Now, did we really just do this? Of course we did, Leo said, clapping him on the shoulder. George, this is our new kingdom. Have you thought of a name for it yet? George paused. He hadn't gotten that far. He thought for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. I have it. He looked at Leo, his expression serious. Let's call it the Hearth. It's about warmth, a new start, the heart of a home. Leo's heart warmed at the suggestion. I love it. The Hearth it is. As the two men stood there, filled with excitement for their new venture, Leo's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered it. Hello. May I speak to Mr. Leo Foster? The voice on the other end was obsequious and sycophantic. It's Rick Vance. We met last night at the Porsche dealership. Chapter 7 Rick Vance? Leo raised an eyebrow, remembering the smarmy man from the dealership. What would he possibly want? What is it? Leo's tone was frosty. Rick, on the other end, didn't seem to notice or care. His voice oozed with false friendliness. Mr. Foster, a pleasure to hear from you again. Listen, I'm in high-end commercial development, and I know all the best contractors and designers in the city. I heard from my guy at the dealership that you might be new in town. You've got the car, so I figure a new house is next on the list, right? And when it comes to luxury renovations, I'm your man. You just say the word, and I'll get you the best architectural team, the finest materials, and a palace fit for a king. And of course, I'll get you a massive discount. Rick's sales pitch was a transparent attempt to get on Leo's good side and secure a business deal. Leo saw right through it. The display at the dealership had clearly made an impression. He was about to hang up, but then he had a thought. Their new restaurant, The Hearth, needed a complete renovation. Why not use this guy? A house isn't on my radar right now, Leo said coolly. But I did just lease a property. I'm opening a restaurant, and it needs a full renovation. Rick's heart leaped. A deal was a deal. It didn't matter how small. It was his foot in the door. A restaurant? Fantastic. Mr. Foster, you can count on me. Whatever style you want, classic, modern, fusion, I'll make it happen. Where are you now? I can be there in 20 minutes, and we could discuss the plans in person. Leo gave him the address. Less than half an hour later, Rick's BMW 5 Series screeched to a halt at the end of the street. He saw the black Cayenne parked in front of the old tea house and Leo and George standing outside. Rick hurried over, a massive smile plastered on his face. Mr. Foster, so sorry to keep you waiting. He shook Leo's hand vigorously, then noticed George standing beside him. He paused. The man looked familiar. Wasn't that Chloe's father? But Chloe had said she didn't know the guy in the Cayenne. So why was her father standing here with him? Looking like they were old friends? Rick's mind raced. The situation was far more complicated than he'd thought. But he didn't let his confusion show. He just gave George a polite nod. And this is my uncle, Leo said simply. Oh, a pleasure to meet you, sir, Rick said, turning his charm on George. George just gave a curt nod. He wasn't a fan of slick, overly friendly young men. Leo cut to the chase. This is the place. Take a look inside and draw up a proposal and a quote. You got it. I'm on it. Rick immediately switched into professional mode, taking measurements, snapping photos, and jotting down notes. After about 30 minutes, he came back out, notepad in hand. Mr. Foster, the building has great bones. It wouldn't take much to make it spectacular. I'd recommend a modern rustic design. It's elegant but warm, perfect for an exclusive restaurant. As for the price, don't you worry. I'll get it to you at cost. For the design, labor, and all materials, we're looking at $30,000. And I guarantee we'll use only the best. $30,000? Leo wasn't an expert on renovation costs, but it sounded surprisingly reasonable. He glanced at George for his opinion. George thought for a moment. The price is one thing, but quality and timeline are more important. We want to open as soon as possible. Rick immediately puffed out his chest. Sir, you have my word. The quality will be impeccable. I'll personally oversee the project, and I can have it done in 1 month. 1 month from today, you'll be ready for business. If we're a single day late, I'll pay you $1,000 penalty for each day. He was clearly willing to do whatever it took to get in Leo's good graces. Leo looked at him and nodded. All right, let's draw up a contract. Excellent. Rick was overjoyed and practically skipped back to his car to get the paperwork. Watching him go, George couldn't help but shake his head. Leo, I'm really starting to get it now. Money really does make the world go round. Yesterday, that guy wouldn't have given you the time of day. Today, he's following you around like a puppy. Leo just smiled. That was just the way the world worked. Back at the Sullivan house, Chloe hadn't slept a wink. The image of Leo driving away in his new Cayenne, not even giving her a second glance, was burned into her mind. She couldn't understand it. She just couldn't. How had the man she'd seen as a complete failure suddenly become so impressive? Where did he get the money? Had he been hiding a secret fortune from her the entire time they were married? The thought filled her with a bitter, resentful rage. How dare he? She had suffered through 3 years of a modest lifestyle, pinching every penny, while he was secretly sitting on a mountain of cash. And the moment they were divorced, he starts living like a king, buying luxury cars. And what about her? She had been publicly humiliated and abandoned by Rick Vance, becoming the laughingstock of her social circle. The more she thought about it, the more furious and wronged she felt. Karen's mood was even fouler. George hadn't come home, and his phone was still off. The sense of unease she'd been feeling had grown into full-blown panic. "Mom, do you think Dad is really gone for good?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling. "He wouldn't dare." Karen slammed her hand on the table, her voice a mixture of anger and fear. "He's a broke old man. Where could he possibly go? I'm telling you, he's just hiding somewhere, waiting for us to come crawling to him. We cannot be the first to break. We'll see who can last longer." Just then, the doorbell rang. Mother and daughter exchanged a look, both thinking it was George. A smug look crossed Karen's face. She smoothed her clothes and cleared her throat, preparing a scathing lecture for her wayward husband. Chloe ran to open the door, but the person standing there wasn't George. It was a stranger in a crisp suit and wire-rimmed glasses. Behind him stood two large, imposing men in black. "Good morning. Is this the residence of Ms. Karen Sullivan?" the man asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm she. Who are you?" Karen asked, her guard immediately up. The man handed her a business card. "I am Mr. George Sullivan's legal counsel. My name is Mr. Peterson." "A lawyer?" Karen and Chloe stared at him, bewildered. Why would George need a lawyer? Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses and spoke in a flat, professional tone. "I am here today on behalf of my client, Mr. George Sullivan, to formally notify you, Miss Sullivan, regarding the division of assets in your divorce. Mr. Sullivan has entrusted me to handle all related matters. According to state law, while my client has voluntarily relinquished his claim to this marital property, he will be reclaiming all personal premarital assets, as well as any personal investment gains acquired during the marriage." Mr. Peterson retrieved a thick file from his briefcase and handed it to Karen. This file contains a list of the assets in question and all relevant legal documentation. Please review it at your convenience. Furthermore, my client requests that you and Ms. Chloe Sullivan vacate the property he owns at the address in the West End Lofts within 3 days. After 3 days, we will take legal action to have you forcibly removed. Chapter 8. What? Karen shrieked as if she'd been struck by lightning. What premarital assets? What lofts? George doesn't have any money. He's a broke loser. She snatched the file from the lawyer's hand and began to flip through the pages frantically. The more she read, the colder she felt. The documents were clear and precise. 1 condominium unit, 1,200 SQ, FD, at the West End Lofts. Owner, George P. Sullivan. Premarital asset, inherited. 1 investment portfolio with Morgan Stanley. Initial principal $500,000. Current value, approximately $780,000. Premarital asset. Various mutual fund shares, valued at approximately $300,000. Personal investment gains, line after line, all in black and white, legally verified and notarized. Karen's mind went blank. She had been married to George for 30 years. She thought she had him completely under her thumb, knew him inside and out. She thought his modest city salary was their only income, that he had nothing to his name but his share of their mortgaged house. She never, ever imagined that George, her quiet, spineless husband, had been hiding this kind of wealth from her. She knew about the property in the West End. It was an old house his parents had left him in a rundown part of the city. She'd been nagging him for years to sell it, and he'd always mumbled an agreement but never did anything. She thought he was just being sentimental. She had no idea the neighborhood had been gentrified years ago, and his dilapidated property had been bought out by developers who had given him a brand new luxury condo in its place. And George had never said a single word about it. And the investments? A portfolio worth over $1 million. Where had he gotten that kind of money to begin with? This is impossible. It's all fake. He forged these documents. Karen screamed, tearing at the papers like a madwoman. Mr. Peterson watched her, his expression unchanged. "Miss Sullivan, I assure you, all of these assets have a clear and legal paper trail. Tearing up that copy of the documents will accomplish nothing. I have others. If you wish to contest the division of assets, we can certainly do so in court. However, I would advise you to settle this amicably. A messy court battle would not be beneficial for your public reputation." "Court," The word terrified Karen. She had spent her entire life obsessed with appearances. The thought of her divorce becoming a public legal spectacle was her worst nightmare. All the fight went out of her. She collapsed onto the sofa, muttering to herself, How could he do this to me? Chloe was in a state of shock. She had always seen her father as a simple, unambitious man. She never realized he was the one with the hidden depths. What was even more chilling was that she had known about the condo development. She had even suggested to her father that he give the new condo to her brother Kyle to live in. At the time, George had just been silent. Chloe had taken his silence as a reluctant agreement, assuming he was just too afraid of her mother to say yes. But now she saw the truth. Her father had been planning this for years. He had never intended for them to get a piece of that property. A horrifying thought dawned on her. Her father's decision to file for divorce wasn't a spontaneous act. It was premeditated. Vacate in 3 days? Chloe finally found her voice, grabbing onto the most immediate problem. We can't. My brother, Kyle, is living there. Kyle had been living in the condo for the past year, rent-free, because it was closer to his university. Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses, his face impassive. I'm sorry, Miss Sullivan. That property belongs solely to Mr. George Sullivan. He has the legal right to decide who resides there, and he has decided to reclaim it. If your brother is not out of the premises within 3 days, we will have his belongings removed by the authorities. Chloe trembled with rage. This was brutal. This wasn't the quiet, timid father she knew. This was colder and more ruthless than anything even Leo had done. Mr. Peterson had delivered his message. He had no desire to linger. He gave a polite, shallow nod. I have relayed my client's instructions. Ladies, good day. He and his 2 bodyguards turned and left. The heavy front door clicked shut, sealing the 2 women in a dead, suffocating silence. Karen and Chloe stared at each other, their faces a mixture of shock, fury, and raw panic. It's over. It's all over, Karen whispered, her voice hollow. She had thought that divorcing George would leave her with the house and half their savings, free to live a life of leisure. But now, George was the one walking away with the real wealth, leaving her with a mortgaged house and a mountain of credit card debt. The foundation of her world, her husband, had not just left. He had betrayed her in the most unexpected and humiliating way possible. Mom, what are we going to do? Chloe cried. Kyle's going to be kicked out. Dad is taking everything. Karen shot up from the sofa, her eyes bloodshot with fury. We have to find him. We have to find that old bastard and make him listen to reason. And Leo. Yes, it has to be Leo. She latched onto the idea like a drowning woman grabbing a piece of driftwood. This is all Leo's fault. That little snake. He must have put your father up to this. George is too stupid to think of all this on his own. It was Leo. He has money now, and he's come back to destroy us. In her panic, Karen's twisted logic seemed perfectly clear. All of her rage, all of her fear, she focused on one person. Leo? Come on, we're going to find Leo. We'll make him tell us where your father is. I'm going to ask him to his face what he thinks he's doing. Karen grabbed her purse and pulled Chloe toward the door. She had one thought in her mind. Find those 2 men and take back what was rightfully hers, no matter what it took. Chapter 9, The Renovation of the Hearth, was proceeding at a breakneck pace under Rick Vance's obsessive supervision. Leo and George were just as busy. Leo spent his days navigating the city's bureaucracy, securing permits and licenses, and sourcing top-of-the-line kitchen equipment. George, meanwhile, rediscovered his passion, visiting farmers markets and specialty suppliers, hunting for the perfect ingredients to recreate the flavors he remembered. 30 years of disuse hadn't dulled his skill, it had only concealed it. One afternoon, in a temporarily rented kitchen, George cooked a simple stir-fry for Leo. The moment Leo tasted it, he knew their restaurant was going to be a success. The flavors were complex and perfectly balanced, a symphony of sweet, sour, and savory notes. It was, without a doubt, the most amazing thing he had ever eaten. George, with skills like this, you could be a chef for the White House, Leo said with genuine admiration. George blushed at the praise, but his face was lit with a joy Leo had never seen before. As long as you like it, that's all that matters. I can cook for you every day. Having rediscovered his dream and his dignity, The man looked 20 years younger. One afternoon, Leo and George were at the construction site, finalizing design details with the architect. Rick Vance was hovering nearby, fetching coffee and making himself useful. Suddenly, the screech of tires echoed from the street, followed by the appearance of Karen and Chloe, who stormed onto the property like a pair of angry wasps. Leo Foster. George Sullivan. Get out here. Karen's voice was sharp enough to shatter glass. The construction workers all stopped what they were doing and stared. Leo frowned. He knew this was coming. George's face fell at the sight of his ex-wife. He instinctively took a step back, the ingrained fear of 30 years not so easily erased. Leo subtly moved to stand in front of him and walked forward to meet the two women. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice cold. They looked haggard and worn, but their eyes burned with a desperate, venomous rage. "What do we want? You have the nerve to ask us what we want." Karen jabbed a finger at Leo's chest. "You ungrateful snake. We took you into our family for 3 years, and this is how you repay us. You manipulated my husband into divorcing me. You're trying to steal our family's assets. What kind of sick game are you playing?" Her accusations were so divorced from reality that Leo couldn't help but laugh. "Karen, you need to be careful with your words. I manipulated George? He's a 60-year-old man. Do you really think I can make him do anything he doesn't want to do? And what do you mean, steal your assets? Have I taken a single penny from you? You?" Karen was left speechless. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes red and puffy, fixed on Leo. "Stop pretending, Leo. My father is a simple man. How would he suddenly know about investment portfolios and lawyers? It was you, wasn't it? You were behind this all along. You knew you were about to get rich, so you planned this whole thing. You pushed me to divorce you so you could team up with my dad and ruin us." Her voice was thick with a self-pitying rage, as if she were the innocent victim in all of this. Leo looked at her, a sense of profound absurdity washing over him. "Chloe, your imagination is far more vivid than your memory. Let me remind you, you were the one who wanted the divorce. You were the one who couldn't wait to go out and celebrate the second it was final. And now, somehow this is my fault?" Chloe's face flushed. She couldn't deny it, but she couldn't accept it either. Even if I was the one who asked for the divorce. You can't treat us like this. We were married. How can you be so cruel?" She was trying to play the sympathy card, to appeal to whatever residual feelings he might have had for her. But Leo's heart was a frozen rock. "Cruel? You think I'm being cruel?" Leo let out a sharp, humorless laugh. His eyes swept over her, then to Karen standing behind her. "Oh, you're right. I am cruel. I was so cruel that I spent 3 years being your personal chef and housekeeper, only to be thrown out like garbage. I was so cruel that I drained my parents' retirement fund to help your brother, only to be told I had no ambition. I was so cruel that when we divorced, I walked away with nothing, not even asking for my share of the house we paid for together. Tell me, Chloe, how could I possibly be so cruel?" Each of Leo's words was a sharp slap across their faces. The color drained from their cheeks. The surrounding workers, having pieced together the story, were now staring at the mother and daughter with open contempt. Rick Vance watched the scene unfold with a morbid fascination. He was finally starting to understand the depth of Leo's animosity. Karen, ever the fighter, recovered first. She dodged around Leo and grabbed George's arm. "George, tell me the truth. Has this monster been feeding you lies? You need to cut ties with him right now and come home. We could talk about the assets. You can have the condo. I don't care anymore. Just come home, please." She was finally backing down, realizing that George was her only lifeline. If she could just get him back, she could fix this. George flinched at her touch, trying to pull his arm away, but lacking the nerve. Leo stepped in, gently but firmly removing her hand. "Karen, please show some respect. This is Mr. George Sullivan, my business partner and the head chef of the Hearth. He is not your husband. We're divorced," George finally said, his voice stronger, bolstered by Leo's presence. He looked at Karen, his eyes clearer and steadier than ever before. "Karen, it's over between us. My lawyer will handle the assets. Don't come looking for me again." With that, he turned, and together with Leo, walked back toward the building, not sparing the two women another glance. "George!" Karen shrieked after him. Chloe completely fell apart. She watched the two men walk away, their backs straight and proud. They looked like they belonged together, a team. She and her mother were the outsiders, the ones left behind. A wave of regret, so powerful it was physically painful, washed over her. She had made a terrible mistake. She hadn't just thrown away a man who loved her. She had thrown away a future, a life of unimaginable happiness and success. She stumbled forward, screaming at Leo's retreating back, all pretense of pride gone. "Lao, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please come back. We can get remarried. Please. I don't care about the money. I just want you back." Her desperate cries echoed across the noisy construction site, sounding pathetic and ridiculous. Leo's stride faltered for just a fraction of a second. Then, without turning his head, he and George disappeared inside the building. The door closed behind them, shutting out the noise, shutting out Chloe's pleas, shutting out the past. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the dusty ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Karen stared at her pathetic daughter, her patience finally snapping. She slapped Chloe hard across the face. "Stop crying. What good does crying do? This is all your fault. If you hadn't been so insistent on the divorce, none of this would have happened." She placed all the blame squarely on her daughter's shoulders. Chloe held her stinging cheek, staring at her mother in disbelief. "It is all my fault. If only she hadn't been so greedy. If only she had shown him a little kindness. If only." But there were no more if-onlys. As the two women wallowed in their misery, a black Mercedes S-Class pulled up quietly at the end of the street. A graceful, elegant young woman stepped out of the car. She glanced at the weeping figures on the ground, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, but paid them no mind. She walked directly to the door of the hearth and knocked gently. The door opened. It was Leo. He looked surprised to see the woman standing on the doorstep. "Ava, what are you doing here?" The woman, Ava Chun, was Leo's old college friend. She was also the sister of his tech genius roommate, the one whose company had made Leo a millionaire. Ava smiled warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "My brother was worried about you. He thought you might take your newfound fortune and do something stupid. He sent me to check up on you." She peered inside. "So this is your grand new venture?" "The hearth. I like the name." Leo laughed. "Come on in. It's a mess, so don't judge." He stepped aside to let her in. Ava walked into the courtyard, taking in the beautiful old building and the flurry of activity. She nodded in approval. "Well, it looks like you're serious about this. You're more responsible than my brother gave you credit for." George came out from inside, looking a little shy in the presence of the elegant stranger. "Leo, who is this?" "George, this is my friend from college, Ava Chun." "Ava, this is my business partner, George Sullivan." Leo introduced them. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Sullivan," Ava said, extending a hand. George quickly wiped his own hand on his apron before shaking hers. "Nice to meet you two." He could see right away that this young woman was special. Standing next to Leo, they looked good together. A much better match, he thought, than his own foolish daughter. At the end of the street, Chloe watched the scene unfold, her heart numb with pain. She saw the easy, genuine smile Leo gave this woman, a smile she had never seen before. She watched as this stranger was welcomed into the world that should have been hers. She even saw her own father looking at the woman with an expression of approval. It felt like a knife twisting slowly in her gut. Who was she? What was her relationship with Leo? An old friend from college? Was it really that simple? Chloe didn't believe it for a second. Karen saw Ava too, and the expensive Mercedes she had stepped out of. Her eyes widened with greed and envy. Another rich one, and this one was clearly in a different league than Rick Vance. Seeing how comfortable she was with Leo, Karen felt a venomous jealousy rise in her throat. Why? Why did this loser, Leo, suddenly have all these beautiful, successful women flocking to him the moment he was free of her daughter? That hussy! Karen scrambled to her feet, pointing a trembling finger at Ava's back. That shameless homewrecker! Her shrill voice carried across the courtyard, drawing the attention of the three inside. Ava turned, her brow furrowed slightly. She looked at the disheveled, screaming Karen and the pathetic, weeping Chloe, and a look of understanding dawned on her face. "Are they?" she asked Leo quietly. Leo nodded, his expression hardening. Don't pay any attention to them. He didn't want their ugliness to touch Ava. George was shaking with anger, pointing a finger at his ex-wife, unable to form words. You are unbelievable. But Ava just smiled. She walked to the edge of the courtyard, maintaining a polite distance from the two women. Her gaze was calm, but it held a sharp, analytical quality. Ma'am, did you just accuse me of being a homewrecker? She paused, her voice quiet but carrying clearly. First of all, Leo is a single man. He is free to associate with whomever he pleases. Second, even when he was your son-in-law, he was a person, not your property. You had no right to control his life then, and you certainly have no right now. And finally, Ava's gaze shifted to Chloe's pale, tear-streaked face. A woman who is incapable of recognizing the value of her own husband has no right to criticize anyone else. Instead of making a scene here, perhaps your time would be better spent looking in a mirror and figuring out where you went so wrong. Ava's words were like a surgeon's scalpel, precisely and cleanly slicing through Karen and Chloe's ridiculous pride, exposing the raw, ugly truth of their greed and foolishness for all to see. Karen was left sputtering, her face turning a blotchy purple. Chloe felt a wave of shame, so intense she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Having said her piece, Ava turned her back on them and smiled gracefully at Leo and George. Come on, let's not let unpleasant people ruin our evening. I know a wonderful restaurant nearby. My treat, to celebrate the future success of the hearth. Sounds great, Leo agreed instantly. George nodded as well. And so, under the hateful glares of Karen and Chloe, the three of them walked away, laughing and talking, toward the black Mercedes. Leo even held the door open for Ava. The image of the two of them, framed by the afternoon sun, was one of perfect, effortless harmony. Chloe watched them go, and a fresh wave of tears streamed down her face. She finally understood. Her world and Leo's were now completely separate. He had a new life, new friends, and new everything, and she was left with nothing but a crushing, all-consuming regret. As the car pulled away from the curb, Chloe summoned the last of her strength and screamed after it, a raw, guttural cry of pure desperation. Now! But the car didn't slow. It drove down the street and disappeared around the corner, just like he had walked out of her life, decisively and without looking back. Karen looked at the departing luxury car, then at her broken daughter, and the stress of the last few days finally overwhelmed her. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted, collapsing in a heap on the ground. Mom, wake up. The only sound left in the alley was Chloe's panicked, terrified screams. 1 month later, the hearth officially opened for business. There was no grand opening party, no flashy marketing campaign. A simple, hand-carved wooden sign was hung above the door, and that was it. On the first night, there was only one table of guests: Ava, her brother, and a few of their friends from the business world. George, in his element, prepared a multi-course tasting menu that left everyone speechless. It was, they all agreed, one of the best meals of their lives. Ava's brother, the young tech billionaire, immediately declared that all of his company's future executive dinners would be held at the hearth. Word spread quickly and quietly through the city's elite circles. Soon, the hearth became the most exclusive and sought-after reservation in town. You had to book a month in advance, and only through a personal referral. George became the revered Chef Sullivan, a culinary legend. Leo was the mysterious, rarely seen owner. The divorce buddies had become the city's most celebrated golden partners. One evening, after the last guests had departed, Leo and George sat in the now-empty courtyard, sipping tea under the moonlight. So, have they been back? Leo asked quietly. George shook his head, a look of peaceful contentment on his face. No. I heard they sold the house to pay off their debts and moved into a small apartment in a rough part of town. Karen couldn't handle the stress and got sick. Chloe is working 2 jobs to take care of her. I hear it's been very hard for them. Leo was silent. George glanced at him. You don't need to feel guilty, Leo. They made their choices. This is the consequence. Leo nodded. He was right. He raised his teacup, gently tapping it against George's. To us, then. To our new lives. George smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes full of genuine happiness. To new lives? The tea was warm and fragrant. In the distance, the city lights twinkled, but inside their quiet courtyard, all was peaceful. Leo leaned back in a chair, looking up at the moon, and let out a long, slow breath. Divorce hadn't been an end. It had been the beginning of a much, much better life. Just then, Ava appeared at the courtyard gate. She had changed into a simple, elegant dress and was holding a small container. She smiled at them both. "I brought dessert. I made it myself. Care to try?"